This is the Energizing India Podcast.
Welcome to the Energizing India Podcast. India's electric bus story may become one of the most important chapters for the clean mobility transition in the country. While most electric vehicle conversations focus on cars and scooters, buses are really where the impact can be massive. India has some 2 million buses, but only a fraction operate from organized depots where charging can be planned and scaled. In 2024, India registered 3,700 electric buses. Compare that with more than 41,000 diesel buses registered the same year. So the shift has clearly begun, but we are still very early in the piece. The government wants to change that fast. The PME Bus Saver program targets some 10,000 electric buses with a new payment security mechanism that is meant to support the introduction of more than 38,000 electric buses between 2025 and 2029. But the real question is not really about procurement, it's operations. Can electric buses deliver a lower lifetime cost over diesel? Can they guarantee a higher uptime? Will the charging network be reliable? And can bankable returns be generated for fleet operators? This is what we're going to ponder today, and we're delighted to welcome on the program Saurabh Patwardhan, CEO of Prasanna Purple Mobility, a company with decades of experience across city, intercity, corporate, school, and tourism bus operations. Today, we'll discuss what is working for the electrification of public transport, what is still difficult, and what India must solve to electrify bus mobility at scale. Saurabh Patwardhan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here today.
Saurabh, you're one of the bigger operators of bus fleets in the country. You've got all sorts of fleets from ICE, CNG, as well as electric.
Yeah.
I think you would have moved to electric like most people around Corona.
Trying to do that, yeah.
I wanted to understand, what is the real market situation of the energy transition in mobility today?
So I'll break that in two pieces, right? Because we're talking about a 2 million bus market, which you rightly mentioned. But when you break that down into categories, you have intercity at just 100,000 buses. So the remaining 1.9 million, excluding the STUs, are all in either employee mobility, school bus, or then the intracity stage carriage kind of operations. Now, considering and assuming that what products we have today, right, in the market are the capital investment is a little higher than what we are used to, let's just say, because ICE is, just plug and play, you buy a bus, start filling diesel, start using it. Because of the complexity and cost, the used cases which actually match economic goals of operators are actually fit in perfectly for the intercity operations. So intercity operations of 100,000, if you see, and the current transition is maybe not even 200, excluding, so not 200, maybe about 600 electric buses in the private market are all that have transitioned. So we have a long way to go, obviously. But if you put down the TCO on paper, suddenly a lot of routes, maybe about at least 40% of the routes in India today already make sense. So we are hopeful that in days to come, we'll see acceleration, and companies like ours are doing their best to try and lead that way. But as of now, the transition is at a very, very nascent stage. So we'll see a lot of action in years to come.
So interesting comment you made about distance kind of creating the TCO argument. So I'm hearing the longer the distance, the easier the argument to convert. You've talked about 40 routes that already have demonstrated it's cheaper to have an electric bus than diesel. What is it that makes that TCO a slam dunk?
So more than the absolute distance of the route, right? You need routes wherein the bus can actually do a to and fro trip and then again go back for an additional trip. That is where the routes make sense. Because if you pick longer routes, which is about 50% of that 100,000 bus market, is buses which currently do more than 600 kilometers a day. With the current battery pack, you cannot do 600 kilometers on a single charge. And when you try to plug in an opportunity charge for 1 hour, customers don't like it. So therefore, you're talking about a market which is then doing less than 400 kilometers, less than 350 kilometers from a point to point. And then you can do multiples of those trips in a day. So there's plenty of opportunity, especially connecting tier 1 cities like a Bombay or a Pune or a Bangalore or a Delhi with the neighboring tier 2 city. And I think that is the first opportunity which we will see transitioning the fastest. Any bus which does more than 400 kilometers currently, ideally 500, your TCO suddenly starts looking significantly better, because what we've realized is that, and this is a bold statement, that the end customer does not care about whether it's an EV or an ICE bus, right? So for him, a bus is a bus is a bus. So in order to meet the certain value by perception in his head, you have to make sure that you keep the ticket prices at par or competitive, let's just say, with ICE vehicles. In order to do that, if you hit, let's say, 500 kilometers a day on an EV bus today, and if you efficiently are able to keep your TCO under 45 rupees, that is when you can really channelize, a sustainable business wherein you're making money, the customer is happy, and you're still able to transition
So
to
that's
cleaner.
45 rupees a
45
kilometer.
rupees a kilometer is what we've learned is the number that we have to be able to, fit the EV operations.
So let's talk about how you determine that, Saurabh. How do you determine that in diesel, and how does your spreadsheet, what are you looking at in your spreadsheet in electric to get to that number?
So typically there are 4 main components, right? So one is for diesel, it is the capital investment, of course, of the bus, which is typically about 50% today of what a capital investment for an EV is. So if you compare a 12-meter versus 12-meter EV and ICE, the ballpark range for an EV in terms of cost itself would be around 1.45 to 1.50 crores, whereas a comparable ICE would be at about 75. So you're talking about a 2x difference there. So the TCO per kilometer, the per kilometer capex for the diesel buses is about in the range of about maybe 10 or 12 rupees a kilometer. This is a clear calculation of the EMI divided by what kilometers you do on a monthly basis. So 10 or lower than 10 is what we typically are. In case of EVs, this goes as high as 20. And so which is where the 2x capex goes. So your energy cost is the second component of this, which is extremely critical. So diesel cost is about 30 rupees kilometer, in the range of about, let's just say, depending on the make and model, between 26 and 30 rupees kilometer. And energy cost, which we assumed when we went live, we were assuming maybe a 12 rupee kilometer. So we learned that it's not the case, because there's too much that we have to optimize in order to get to that 12. But currently, most of the operators are working around 15 rupees kilometer. And so therefore, let's assume 15 for now. So you're left, so 20 on the capex on an EV, 15 on energy is about 35. Your driver cost typically is about 5. So you're about 40. And typically at a pan-India level, the toll which we calculate is at about maybe 4 or 5 rupees a kilometer. So the pure direct cost, if we engineer it this way, then gets to 45. And in case of diesel, you're at 30 with your fuel, or 27, let's assume. You're at about 8 to 10 on your capex. So you're at about 37, 38. And then the driver numbers are the same. Driver and toll are the same. So both cases, you're close to about 45, 46. And EVs will actually start gaining benefit as we are able to lower this from 45 towards the 40 range, which is very much doable, because even if we are able to find the right energy cost, and when I say right, one of the areas where we are working on is how do we so when we use a charge point operator, he provides energy as a service to us. There is a straight GST implication, which itself adds 2 rupees to our cost. Whereas if we take the meter ourselves and then pay for the energy bill separately, do the capital investment ourselves, yes, it's a little difficult to mobilize funds at every location to be able to do that. But wherever we can, we already, so in Pune, we will charge at 11 rupees a kilometer now. But when I go to Bangalore, I'll start at 16. So, which again, I'll need to work and bring to 11 at scale. Every depot, in order to do 11, I need a density of at least between 30 and 50 buses to make sense of the capital investment going into setting that depot up. So, may not be possible in all cases, but the blended probably between 10 and 15 is where reality will be.
And are you able to offset that GST with your tickets?
No,
it's a one-time
we are not able to do that.
Right.
It's a cost item for us.
Okay. So, Saurabh, you guys went into this very early. And what's interesting about India is that the big vehicle manufacturers, the Tatas, the Leylands, they didn't really get into electric buses. It was the bus builders, the body builders that started launching electric buses, the JBMs, PMI, Switch, as well as, well, not Switch, the company in BYD, right, Electra. And what are the early issues that you faced? You must have had teething issues because everybody was learning. The bus builders were learning. You guys were learning. What sorts of teething issues did you face where you were like, oh my God, I wish I hadn't gone electric?
So one of the things we realized is when we look at an electric bus, it's completely different from what we've been doing for the last 40 years, right? The way everything about it, the way we have to do preventive maintenance, the way we have to monitor the OBD, the data, the things which we need to monitor in order to make it efficiently run, training our staff to be able to do so. So training actually is something that we undermined. And like us, a lot of people undermine because the same mechanics which were doing ICE cannot touch an EV. They have no idea because suddenly the parts which they're used to are not there in that bus. So I think whether it's the driver, whether it's the mechanics, whether it's the supervisors, the first piece is to understand what this animal is, right? So because then you're talking about significantly lower number of components with completely different working logic. And then the second thing we realized is that charging a bus, right? In our head, we think that charging a bus is like charging a phone, which we realized it's not. And, the chemistry of the battery, the charging compatibility, whether it's a 2C. In fact, these terms 1C, 2C, we got to know much later after our first bus came in 2019. After that, we started learning and studying about that, etc. Right? So understanding and taking a deep dive into the technical details of the bus is something that we, in hindsight, could have done better. Training our people to operate them slightly better so you have low breakdowns is something that we thought we could have done better. And the third thing is, understanding compatibility on the charging front, about how we can, so how it's important to do a charging test between, so to make sure that a certain type of charger works with a certain type of OEM is important. Because although all are CCS2, our assumption was CCS2 is CCS2, right? What can go wrong? But then the complexity of what is the power supply at that location, complexity of how those softwares talk to each other from the charger point, from the OEM point. So I think those things, because we don't understand it, gave us some sleepless nights for sure, because you always get scared of what you just don't understand. So the more you learn, the more you educate yourself, the more you bring in experts to do that. It takes away that pain. But the initial anxiety obviously came on account of these 2-3 things.
It's an interesting comment you make about how it should be CCS2, but it doesn't work. And that's unique to India because we do, I don't want to use the word jugaad, but we do a lot of customization. And there's a lot of rush to market in the early years. And so you do have instances where the bus and the charger won't talk to each other, and all the charger companies are scrambling to make it work. And, it costs a lot of money, headache, and pressure on all sides between the fleet operator, the OEM, and the charger OEM as well. We've been through those sorts of problems. How many electric buses have you got on the road today?
So we're operating 65 right now.
Okay.
Out of which about 55 are with the government. The remaining balance are private. On the private front, in the next 3 months, we will get to about 50 buses. And so in the next 24 months, we'll hit 200 buses on the private front itself.
These are all intercity buses.
These are all pure intercity buses. Simultaneously, we're working on 2 projects where we will be engaging with 2 large corporates for their first deployment of electric buses for their staff transportation business. So we'll be deploying our first 23 EVs for staff transportation in hopefully next month.
Excellent.
I mean, we'll be getting the LOI and then thereafter deploying in 2 months. And the third interesting thing which we've also done to explore how we can further, I would say, amplify this transition story, right? So not all routes make sense on new buses. So what we are also trying out is how a retrofitting play can work. So we've already gotten a bus retrofitted. We're operating it as we speak. And maybe for tier 2 routes, maybe where there is slightly less, I would say, customer expectation of new buses all the time. All tier 1 routes are all, people just want new buses. So you can't take a retrofitted bus there. Sure. But as a combination of all of this, we are hopeful that over the next couple of years, we will be maybe at 300 EVs for sure. And this is a very practical plan because we believe that in this market, it's not always the best to rush. So we are watching products, we're watching routes, we're watching battery technology change, we're watching warranty structures change, CPOs get into different business models to engage with us, etc. So with that, I think the next couple of years is going to be that of steady growth. And hopefully beyond that, we should be able to plan transitioning a much larger piece of our overall fleet of about 1,000 buses into going electric.
So you've talked about the many different subsectors, right? There's school, there's office, buses, and you're just getting into that. And then, of course, there's intercity public transport. What is the obvious use case that should convert the fastest in India that everyone's missing? Because everyone's focusing on these government-funded projects, right? For 10,000 buses.
So the absolutely obvious use case is intercity, right? So you just cannot beat the unit economics of a intercity if it's optimized well. Now, what we've learned is even intercity is not as standard as buy a bus, put it in play, right? You need to actually, it's become a craft, right? From which OEM has a suitable bus. So what size do you want? Do you want a 10.5 meter, 9 meter, 12 meter, 13.5 meter? Do you want a seater, sleeper, hybrid? Do you want a battery chemistry, which is LFP, or do you want NMC? Do you want a longer battery life, or do you just want to stick with the LFP for its other benefits on the temperature conditions in India, etc.? Once you get past that, what is the size of the battery you want? Do you want a 420? Is 370 doable? The more complexity it's gotten to making these decisions, because a heavier battery pack means you're losing out on your efficiency. So therefore, your efficiency lost is translating into a higher operating cost per kilometer. So once you're done with the OEM, battery size, battery pack, and configuration, then it's about what should be your origin and destination charging in infra, like which locations, why do you need an opportunity charge, if yes, at what point, at what cost. So I think what this is doing is it's not as simple as earlier we used to do: buy a fleet of buses, decide upon 10 routes and get going. So which is why I feel that this level of planning and complexity and execution requires a certain awareness amongst the organization, which will give good opportunity to I would say organized intercity operators to transition the first. One, due to its economic reasons. Two, because while it might be aggressive to say that, I do believe it's creating a certain moat for unorganized players to actually be able to compete with the organized ones on some tier 1 routes once you optimize all of this ecosystem well. So I feel that the no-brainer would be short distance, less than 400 kilometers, intercity route, seater. To concoct, that is my definite view, that these routes have no choice but to go electric over the next 2-3 years. So right now we are at least thinking about whether or not. My firm belief is in the next 2 years, the seater intercity sub 400 market will be all electric.
So let's probe that a little bit more. You said 3 or 4 years. So what do you expect in this sector by 2030? You said all electric, but let's just try and define that in numbers.
So based on what I'm observing amongst the bus operators, which is a very close knit community of just 3,000 operators. I mean, not just, but yeah. Amongst us 3,000 people, we operate this massive 1.8, 1.9 million buses, right? So therefore, there's a lot of so now, luckily, thanks to platforms such as Pravas or through the Bus Owners Confederation of India, we have multiple engagement opportunities wherein stakeholders come together, discuss, etc. My sense is, based on what I hear, is that every legacy operator has started his journey to evaluate and explore electrification. So there is nobody amongst, let's say, people I know who are in the top, let's say 10% of the operator in terms of size, who's not looked or looking at electrification. Having said that, not everybody will go all in, but everybody will start transitioning. My sense is somewhere around this year or next year. In the next 3 or 4 years, to answer your question, by 2030, organizations such as us, the legacy bunch, because we're not a startup, would have transitioned at least 50% of their fleet to electric, is my sense. Unless something radically different happens, which, completely new technology coming, which, I'm unaware of what that would be. But from my current viewpoint of things, legacy operators would have transitioned between 40 and 50% by 2030. And startups, in any case, there will be no startups without EVs by 2030, is my sense.
And I'm sure this present Gulf War crisis that we're having in supply chain will actually give it more impetus.
Absolutely. So in fact, because the government has very attractive policies in terms of the Maharashtra government has a subsidy, for example, or there is charging infra subsidy pan-India. So with the government's push, clubbed with the fact that even operators, even if it's a small taxi driver, if you speak to anybody today, right, everybody's like, sir, 3 rupees se diesel pad gaya, ye hai. So there is that discontent amongst people. And then if there's an opportunity wherein they can switch, wherein there is an economic case which allows them to switch, my sense is most people want to switch. And I say this as a consumer first, because I realized, in fact, now in hindsight, I realized that when I started using electric cabs, because when I travel to Bangalore, my wife's from Bangalore, so I end up traveling to Bangalore frequently, and now we of course have business there. But for the last 5 or 6 years, I don't recollect taking a ICE taxi at all.
Bangalore's moved
And
fast.
it's very, yeah. And then you have these, local regional startups which have come in providing those. Then there were some large platforms which came in, which didn't work out. Now there are another few ones which have come in. So my sense is that once a consumer gets hooked on to using an EV, it's very difficult to actually go back to an ICE. And this is because you have obviously lower vibrations, lower noise levels, all of that. Plus, it makes you feel good, right? So when I think electric, while I give you a very logical explanation about the TCO, the other part of me, because I'm a father to two daughters, says that the cities which we have brought our children into today are every day we open weather and look at AQI. So if this is where we are today, when they are 20, 25, 30, they would want a world which is at least trying to do something better. And my view is that any business which supports a larger social cause, while obviously focusing on its own profitability, because it's at the end of the day a business. But if you're able to drive a larger social cause, then I would love to be ahead trying to do that. So my sense is that consumers like me, once they start moving and buying tickets of only electric buses, as long as they're fairly priced, we are in India in the end, it's going to be very hard for ICE competition to keep up.
True, very true. So let's talk about the OEMs that you use today. I'm interested in who you are using, and as a bus company, how do you decide who you want to buy your bus from? Because you've had your early learning journey. Yeah. Now you're having a plethora of new options, as
Absolutely.
we saw at Busworld recently.
Absolutely.
So who do you use and how do you decide?
So at present, we use only two types of buses. One is a Skywell chassis, which is a Chinese, and then the second is Switch, which we recently procured. Our priority when we look at a product, right, we look at it from a perspective that this is not a dating affair. You're getting married for 8 years to this asset, right, essentially. So which OEM can then give us support for those 8 years is our first question. Because coming from legacy baggage about bad experiences with potentially all OEMs, because when you have a history of 35 years, you have seen ups, downs of all OEMs, bad product, bad service, all of that, right? So with that baggage, the first question you ask is, I'm investing 2x into an asset. We don't know what this asset is because we are operators in the end, no matter how much we try to learn about them. This technology has not yet completed its first cycle, although, in countries like China, US, there are buses which have done, maybe 1.5, 2 million kilometers. So therefore, we can look at them. But in our country, things are different, is what I believe. And therefore, when the technology is new, you want a partner which can stand by you for those 8 years. And we have had the privilege of having good relations with almost all the legacy OEMs. So the Tatas, the Switches, or so the reason we went with Switch first up was because of our relationship, because essentially we've been buying Ashok Leyland buses for ages, right? So it gives you a certain level of comfort. But having said that, there are some. So the next batch of buses, in fact, is not from a legacy player that we're buying. So therefore, we are also open to buy a new bus from these newer companies, as long as they give us comfort and confidence about service backup. Because I feel that batteries or battery packs are anyways a commodity now, right? So everybody knows who's using what, and so are all the other components in a bus which go in, whether it's a powertrain, AC, everybody knows every component which goes in and the manufacturer which makes it, etc. So what we want as a singular, I would say, priority is to somebody who has a solid service team standing behind us, so that but when something goes wrong, we have a partner which is capable to overcome that with all their might behind us.
So it's an interesting thing you talk about, which is the ability of your partner, the OEM partner, to service you. What are the main bottlenecks that you as a fleet operator have faced? Most people talk about the battery chemistry or the second life of the battery charging network not being available or not being reliable. But what really does the industry not know are the bottlenecks that you're facing
So
as
the
a fleet
first bottleneck
operator?
which we saw is the access to patient capital. Because we are used to financing buses from banks, right? And we are used to financing them for a 5-year, 10-year, because on those buses, even that makes sense because the life in any case is, 5-6 years is what we treat for the ICE buses at interest rates of maybe 8%, 8.2%. Suddenly you're talking about an animal where nobody's willing to touch it under 12%. And despite of that, you have to negotiate, for longer tenures, etc. So access to capital at the right rate of interest is one of the early challenges which we faced. We've overcome that now by partnering with some leasing platforms because we feel that. So we've partnered with 2 or 3 large platforms now, which will take care of our growth ambitions for the next 4 or 5 years. But that will not be available for the smaller players because due to challenges in the way the funds run these platforms, the compliances itself will not give the smaller operators access to this. So that's one. But from our perspective, in the early days, we struggled with this. Second is, actually getting the drivers used to driving an EV. Because earlier they're too used to filling up fuel, and for less than obvious reasons, they like fuel because there's obviously pilferage. Every fleet owner in the country will, concur that there is either little or more pilferage, but the drivers therefore like to be in that business where there is fuel. And the second thing is because this charging infra, looking at the software, you look at something, you plug something in, plug something out, you need to wait for an hour and a half. This takes away comfort which they are used to. So they are used to, topping up in 10 minutes and being on the road, right? Now, suddenly we are telling them that you have to actually put the gun, then press this, then look at that board, then go, then 1.5 hour back, you come back, then you see the state of charge, then you get in the bus. So they are not able to sleep or rest properly between these cycles. So the second challenge which we realized is that, developing drivers for these EV services who are willing to adopt. Not everybody is willing to do so. So that's the second bottleneck I would say. And the third bottleneck is obviously the charging infrastructure, which you mentioned. So I will spend little time on that. But I think public charging infrastructure is definitely an area of concern because while we will set up our own depots in all main locations where we go, unless there are good fast charging public chargers available on the go, it's going to be hard to transition many routes because at least as a backup, you need that. If your charger doesn't work, you can't keep all your fleet off the road because that's a huge revenue loss. And just one day off the road for, let's say, a fleet of Bombay Pune will mean that my entire month's P&L is washed. So you need a backup, which is not there. So that would be my third bottleneck. So financing, drivers of the right type and quality, and the public charging infra would be the 3 main bottlenecks which, in my view, everybody would probably face.
So on that public charging infra piece, is reliability an issue in India? Are you finding that your bus turns up and the charger is not working?
So in fact, we're seeing that every day that it's distributed power supply in these public charging stations. So therefore, if there is any other commercial vehicles like a truck or anything else that's plugged in, the power which you are able to then consume is so little that your schedule goes for a toss. Whereas all our departures which we do for intercity, if I say the schedule is for 5, the bus has to leave at 5. It can't be that, the charger is taking 40 minutes extra because that is just not the way this industry works. So we've seen that reliability is a major issue. And so I would like, the likes of, because I met ChargeZone recently, like I mentioned. So I would like people such as ChargeZone to actually come in. There are multiple more CPOs which have demonstrated they can do this regionally in South India and North India. But I think uptime and SLA is extremely critical, which I hope that from here on we'll only see improvement in it. But as of now, it's a challenge for sure.
Interesting. Now, India has the worst record in the world for road safety. Some 150,000 people die a year, according to government estimates. The WHO said it's twice that. and that's your daily existence, right? All your assets on the road. How do you manage that in the context? I mean, I know there's insurance, there's driver training, but really, I mean, you've got a high risk context on a daily basis. How do you manage it?
So, as a company for the last, I would say at least 15 years, we've spent a lot of time, money, effort, technology on preventive breakdowns, maintenance, or accidents. So we do this by working on two elements. One is all of our buses have these onboard diagnostic tools, right? So which give us information about the vehicle health itself, about if there's any components which are not doing well, if there's temperatures which are off, etc. Second is we are using a lot of AI now on the driver front. So therefore, we have cameras, inward-facing cameras on each and every bus of ours, which transmits information about driver fatigue levels, driver phone usage, if driver tries to eat a packet of tobacco or cigarette or XYZ, right? So we have about 15 parameters based on which the AI reports to the control tower. There are exceptions which you need to work on. So we've set up a 24/7 control tower room which looks at every asset literally like a hawk. And I feel that 9 out of 10 times when there's an accident which has happened, it could have been avoided if somebody actually made the driver aware 5 minutes earlier. So we use technology on the bus and on the driver monitoring front. We work extensively on the drivers itself. So we have a small driver training institute which we've set in house. What I've realized is, it's not just about scaring the drivers. If you do this, this will happen, that will happen. We educate them to actually be aligned with the responsibility which they carry. You're carrying 35 families on your shoulder. So if you don't do this, if you don't take your 8-hour duty seriously, the consequences of that are on your family, your children, and 36 others and their family. So you have a responsibility of 120 people on your shoulders. My learning and view is that drivers, the more involved they feel and the more connected they feel with the company, they tend to perform better. They tend to give their heart and soul into doing less of wrongdoings which otherwise they can do, and this results in a significantly lower accident ratio. So we monitor our accidents on a per million kilometer basis, and I would say we would probably be the only company to do that. But we take safety extremely seriously for about at least 15 years, I would say, because that's when we started this initiative. Of course, it must have been on in some unorganized way before. But I believe that by including the drivers, by using technology, and by counseling them regularly, we also counsel them that so at the end of every trip, whichever depot he reaches to, we prepare a driver scorecard at the end of every month. On that driver scorecard, there are various parameters which show up, whether it's harsh acceleration, whether it's lane cutting, whether it's instant braking. Typically, these 2-3 things are the reason why an accident occurs, right, in the first place. So is it lack of sleep? So we follow sleep schedules extremely seriously. We don't send any driver which is overworked. We have a bench strength, which is a cost to us, but we make sure that every driver rests and then goes to work. So we do some basic things right. We use a lot of technology, a lot of monitoring, and a lot of, I would say, involvement amongst the drivers and then we are lucky and blessed that it's worked for us. We have the lowest accident ratios in the country for any operator per million kilometers.
So you talked about driver behavior, Saurabh. One of the things that bus operators in Indonesia and China have found that when they had women bus drivers, it really changed behavior in a way that was much more trainable and more pliant to safety regulations. You don't see that in India, though. Do you, like, as an operator, is that on your radar, or is that just too hard to address in India?
So we've tried inducting women drivers. In fact, we do have some women trainers, not drivers yet, because the problem is the task involving overnight driving is not typically looked at a profession full of integrity for women to do for some reason. For intracity, I see that definitely is possible. So for school buses, for staff transportation, etc. In fact, we are happy to share that hopefully in the next quarter, we will have maybe 150 electric rickshaws in Delhi, with all women drivers. We'll be the first company to do so, and we will also expand on that because we feel that they take their responsibility much more seriously, and they are much more well behaved in general, or we found a lot of positives, in fact. So we would want to inculcate certain women drivers for our long haul buses, for our staff transportation buses, etc. So we feel realistically maybe about 10% of our overall buses, which is about 100 buses, we can get to women drivers, and those will primarily be in the first phase for intracity applications.
What keeps you up awake at night at 3 a.m.?
So honestly, the pace at which the world is changing. You wake up in the morning, the world is something new, right? In all ways, business, politics, everything. But I think technology, access to capital for newer companies trying to disrupt legacy experiences, change in consumer behavior itself, the way they book tickets, the way they make decisions, etc. Right? So I think for a legacy organization like ours, one of the biggest nightmares is that actually there is people which are starting from scratch, which are trying to completely disrupt what your bread and butter is for the last 30-35 years. So I think so, which is why we try and spend a lot of time in the ecosystem, meeting people, fresh, new, young, all types of businesses. We partner with a lot of young companies as well. So in fact, we've partnered with at least 4 or 5 young mobility startups, wherein we've invested money, incubated them to a certain level, because we feel there's a lot to learn from them. And that is because of this thought. What keeps me up at night is because unless we keep in line with today's times and age, your legacy becomes your weakness. And therefore, we are trying to counter part of that weakness by actually partnering and investing with these companies. But yeah, that would be the number one item.
So conversely, what fills you with hope about the industry?
So what is amazing to see is what I'm seeing in the last 3 or 4 years is the kind of money which is being committed to this market. When there is money, there is talent. When there is talent and money, there is scale. So I'm hopeful to see that in days to come, there will be large mobility platforms which are like industry houses. I always ask this question to my dad, that such a large market, right? 2 million buses, and there's not a single $1 billion mobility business. Why is that the case? And the reason is these two things: capital and talent. So I think now with that flowing in for the last 3-4 years, suddenly you find people, whichever, every alternate meeting I'm going to, there are people from Ivy Leagues which are now in this market. There is capital in millions, which was earlier not even seen on Excel sheets for operators. And so I'm hopeful that this will result in the next 4 or 5 years to truly industrialize this sector. And we will see large platform companies, and we would like to be one of them, doing pan-India business, having a large top line, healthy impact on the society. And for once, this sector would be looked upon as a glamorous, trendy, positive sector. Typically, when you speak, acha bus chalate ho, truck chalate ho. So I think this doesn't need to be the case. But I think with the tailwind that we're seeing today, with the government push, capital and talent, we're going to see a humongous amount of scale in days to come. And to me, honestly, I would love to see scale in mobility.
So the last 2 questions then, Saurabh. Which city in India is actually the outright leader in electrification of public transport or bus transport?
Has to be Bangalore. So Bangalore, because they usually always are the first ones to adapt any technology. Usually. So whether it's the aggregator cabs, whether it's the electric scooter transition, they usually were always the first ones to do that because they are a techie city in the end. The EV ecosystem is also largely there. So there's the manufacturing ecosystem, which is there. So they employ thousands of people. So the adoption is faster. Also, what I've seen specifically with Bangalore is consumers are willing to try new services, new technology, new services. So I think Bangalore is definitely leading the way. But outside of Bangalore, I would say, since I'm in Pune and I see a lot of similarity between Bangalore and Pune in any case, I would say my top 3 picks would be Bangalore, Pune, and maybe Hyderabad. Yeah, Bombay. Yeah. So surprisingly, I feel that also there's lack of large scale operators in Bombay. Bombay doesn't have large operators. Whereas these three cities which I mentioned historically has had larger fleet operators.
Final question then, Saurabh. If you were the transport minister, what are the three things you would do to debottleneck the bus fleet electrification sector?
So one is I would work cohesively with the industry to try and make the public charging infra, which is currently used only by STUs, available to the private sector. With that one change, there'll be two things which will happen. One is the government will also be able to break even earlier on their investment earlier. Second is you'll be able to transition and push private players to move much faster, because then you have the reliable, solid government infrastructure. Because charging requires land, right? And nobody has the kind of land that the government has. So I think that would be the first thing. The second thing I would want to definitely do is build in a driver, a much larger driver training and deployment institution, infrastructure, whatever you might call it, and try to promote driving as a profession. Because a company can't do it, a government can do it. They have access, they have means to do it. So that would probably be the second thing, because that will solve the second bottleneck. The third is work with the finance ministry to try and get loans at more affordable rates, because currently the banks, because they have no way to read what the residual value of this asset is, don't want to take that risk. But the government, if it stands behind them and creates a framework which allows the banks to take a risk to lower their lending price point, I think conventional customers will jump. Conventional customers, in any case, find it a little hard to actually move to even leasing, because leasing has a GST again, right? So conventionally, you're not used to paying a bank EMI with GST. And now when you lease, suddenly you have a GST on top, which you look at from a cost perspective. And then your interest rate is also higher. So I think those three would be the areas that I would definitely want. And in fact, I'm also hopeful that anyways in the next 3 years, with the current government's push, we will see things happening on all those three fronts.
Excellent, Saurabh. What a refreshing conversation this has been. Prasanna Purple is obviously in very good hands. 40% of your fleet is going to be electric by 2030. We're looking forward to cheering you along the sidelines.
Thank you.
And having you come back on the program to talk about your success.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.